Hi everyone, we are so glad you are here with us today. Happy Mother's Day. We celebrate all the moms and mother figures in our lives and can't say it enough. Thank you for all you do. If you are joining us online through our website, we have ways for you to connect, chat, and receive prayer from our prayer team. And if you are watching as a family, we have videos, activities for your kids as well. Well, service is just about to start, so grab a cup of coffee and get settled as we worship together.
Lost, but he brought me. I know his love. Oh, it's free. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am.
Dear moms, and by that I mean those who have mothered, for I have been mothered by many. I had to be carried long after those first 9 months, so I speak to the great chain of moms passing along a baby in a basket. We have always done this, from the mom of Moses who surrendered her child to save him, to the river that carried him, to the princess who saw him, to the sister who suggested that his birth mom nurse him until the princess could raise him in a castle. This mom stuff has never been simple. Dear moms, some of us want to celebrate you. Some of us want to become one of you. Some of us feel failed by you. Some of us failed you. Some of us miss you. Some of us never knew you. We don't know how to honor you with room enough for all of you and all of us. Where do we start? Mom, you teach me more about who God is. A gentle river that carried Moses in a basket, the same spirit in you when you held me for as long as my sadness lasted. We sing of God the Father, words have limits, but I learned from you that women too were made in the image. Thanks for all the stuff you did that was separate from me, for showing me that you could serve and love and still be your own whole. Dear Mom, dear anyone who's let something go, thank you for releasing me so that I too could grow whole, for shedding ideas of who you thought I would be in order to receive who I am. Dear Mom, and dear all who enter into this absurd contract, all who dare to love, nurture, and release, all who tend to the emerging of things, may you stumble into grace, and may this fill you up, that you are loved, that it mattered, that it is enough.
Hi everyone, welcome to Harbor Point and happy Mother's Day. This weekend we are celebrating all the moms and influential women in our lives. You are all rock stars and deserve to be celebrated. There really is no way to fully express how grateful we are for you. And for you kids and dads, it's not too late. We have some fun stuff online to help you thank your mom for who she is and all she does. We just have to say thank you for the ways you are continuing to serve courageously. You have delivered hundreds of meals to elderly neighbors, donated truckloads of critical food and supplies, given blood, and are now packing food every Thursday for families in our community. What a beautiful picture of the love of Jesus, stepping in to help our neighbors wherever there's a need. God is certainly doing some incredible things in this season through your sacrificial generosity. At Harbor Point, giving is a regular part of our worship and aligns our heart with God. Your generosity advances the mission of our church and allows us to be used by God. And so today, we invite you to join God in His work through our church. There are a number of ways you can give. You can text HP Give to the number 97,000 or give online through the giving link. Be sure to follow us on social media so that we can connect and be praying for each other throughout the week. Our Mother's Day giveaways are wrapping up this weekend, so make sure to enter deserving moms to win a gift card from one of our local businesses. But before we start the message, let's take a moment, say hi to one another, go to our Instagram at Harbor Point Church, and comment on the most recent post reminding everyone we are here together. As always, direct message us if you need anything.
Hey everyone, to the moms and the people who have loved us like moms, happy Mother's Day to you. For those of you who made plans or you made a meal for your mother, or those of you who are joining us today for her sake, however you are joining us, welcome. Now, all right, to ask any of the moms or mom figures in our lives what their greatest desire for their kids is that they would be happy. Now, happiness, as a side note, we all know what happiness looks like for a lot of parents right now. It's getting a babysitter and going to get dinner without any children around. And I could just feel the collective agreement across however many devices are watching right now. But moms do want their kids to grow up and have whatever their version of happiness is. And we love this idea. Mothers have made this their life's aim. And of course, it's not an original idea. We all know that. We all know it was Joanna Gaines' idea. You know, obviously she made that up. She made everything. She's wonderful. Now, happiness, to narrow in on sort of a definition of happiness, it's this. Happiness is that feeling or that experience, the result of living the best possible kind of life. Now, that feeling or experience that comes from living the best possible life, that's happiness. We love our moms for this. We love that they think of us like this. We love that that's what they want for us, but that's really not what they want. Happiness is not exactly accurate when they talk about it. When it comes to our moms, and this is a bit of a generalization, obviously, I think when our mothers think about what they imagine to be the definition of happiness for us, and for them, it's mostly about one thing: freedom from the possibility of harm. Any bad stuff. Moms, their happiness is us being kept from danger, freedom from loud music, freedom from being kept cold, freedom from catching a cold, freedom from bad kids, freedom from bad choices, freedom from undercooked chicken, freedom from skin knees and bad dreams, freedom from the embarrassment that comes from not having good manners or not wearing clean underwear in the event of some kind of car accident or whatever. You get it. The list goes on and on. Now, ask yourself, how many times have I put on a jacket because my mother was cold? You weren't cold, you were sweating. You needed a Pepsi. She told you to put a jacket on. And of course, it's our moms who are sure to remind us that any person we don't know is always a stranger. Unless, of course, that person is wearing a costume at an amusement park. Moms are like, stand over there next to that mute cartoon character with the enormous hands. Okay, so wipe off your tears and give him a hug and remember to face this direction so we can post this. And also, don't forget to smile. I mean, that's what moms do. And despite the fact that mom wants us to hug a costume stranger, there's absolutely no confusion about what the term mama bear means when it describes a mother. Someone threatens the cubs, out comes the mama bear. Now, somehow, the expression daddy bear just doesn't quite capture the same essence. You know, you never hear from a father. You know, so there's like these knuckleheads that got in my kid's face during his soccer game. So I went full daddy bear on him. That just sounds like you handed out candy and kazoos. You know, thanks daddy bear, you're the best. You're welcome kids. You know, I don't know, whatever. But there are times when a mom or a mom figure going mama bear is just about the greatest thing ever. And that a mama bear might want our happiness, to have that in our corner, for whatever we're up against, that's something to be grateful for, especially on Mother's Day. Now, we love our moms for this, and they want the best life for us. That we know that. They want the best possible life for us. And well, there's another thing we really ought to consider, and it's way, way, way bigger than that. Now, we're in the middle of a series called Not My Jesus. And what we've been saying as part of this whole series is that human beings are uniquely skilled at interpreting the world around us. We're excellent at this. We're experts at making meaning and finding significance. So we're experts at interpreting stuff. Now, what we're constantly deciding is what does and what doesn't matter. We're trying to figure out why things matter and how they matter. And as we've been saying in this series, Jesus is one of the most interpreted subjects in the history of the world. And it's not like the attempt to make sense of Jesus is a new thing. This is part of his ministry from the get-go. And maybe that's why Jesus asked his disciples this question about how he's being interpreted to them. He says this in Matthew 16, he says, what about you? Amid all the other interpretations, who do you say I am? And to say it differently, Jesus is like, there's a lot of ways people are talking about me. People are saying all kinds of things about me, and people are attempting to describe me in a lot of terms. And sometimes people are right, and sometimes they are way off. But I want to know about you. I'm not asking who am I? I'm asking who do you say I am? That's a way different thing. Now, for any of us who have ever attempted to attach ourselves to Jesus, there's a part of us we occasionally have to come to grips with. It's this: that we all have a tendency to read back into the Bible some of our own biases, some of our own needs and frustrations, and then we just place them onto Jesus. And in a lot of ways, and over time, we have kind of an expectation that Jesus mostly agrees with us. In other words, in moments where if what we long for or how we attempt to handle what we long for is different than the way Jesus would address them, we have a tendency to say, well, then that's just not my Jesus. He's doing it differently than I would. He thinks about it differently than me. What we've also been talking about is this, that often our impression of who Jesus is, and more critically, how Jesus ought to be identified and characterized, is shaped by how we see Jesus through the lens of some of our deepest needs for worthiness and for love and for safety, just like the mama bear. And like I said, we do love our moms for this. And at their best, our moms and our mother figures who loved us with the maternal kind of love. And the simplest way to sum up that kind of love is like this. Because mothers love their kids, and when they're at their best, and what we're celebrating on Mother's Day, because mothers love their kids, mothers want what's best for their kids. Because mothers love their kids, mothers want what's best for their kids. Now, what may be shocking to a lot of us is this. Jesus isn't the same as your mother. I know this is big news. That's the kind of hard-hitting stuff you've come to expect from Harbor Point Church. But Jesus is not the same as your mom. Okay, first of all, Jesus isn't primarily interested in keeping us from harm. I know all the moms who just heard this just said to any of their kids in the room or within earshot, well, kids, that's just not my pastor. That's just some guy from the internet. We don't say things like that. I know Jesus doesn't believe what that guy just said. Now, to be fair, Jesus isn't about recklessness either. I mean, moms, if he rode a bike, we know his mother would insist on the wearing of helmets. And because he loves his mother, he'd be sure to make sure his mother was wearing one. Now, beyond that, what moms might want for us to find the happiness that comes from the best possible kind of life, happiness is a moving target. If you've got young kids in your house, happiness is a nap. It doesn't matter who's taking it. Kids are sleeping, that's happy. If you're sleeping, there's no greater joy in the whole world. And if you're an empty nester, you know, all you do is nap and you walk your dog a lot. It's just time for you to wake up. Let's go. It's Mother's Day. Now, happiness is what we're all hoping to find in whatever form it may take. But there's something that appears to be bigger in the Bible that God is attempting to build, and it's beyond happiness, and it's beyond freedom from harm. And to get there, we'll have to start with a very real picture of maternal love from Matthew chapter 20. So check this out, Matthew 20, verses 20. It says this, "Then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to Jesus with her sons, and kneeling down, asked a favor of him," meaning Jesus. Now, okay, anybody have a mom who's ever tried to advocate for you? They went to talk to a coach or call in a favor with the teacher, and the teacher, your mom is like, "Hey, I'm happy to help out, but that paper isn't gonna mache itself. How about little Timmy gets an extra boost in the old California mission project? I mean, isn't an 88% really an A- in most of the world? And what do you say we do a little rounding?" Anybody have mom ever do that? Anybody, a coach or a teacher or administrator, ever talk to a mother who asked for a favor? And it is very, very tough to turn down a mom who was asking for a favor. They're pretty persuasive people. So this mom, in this case, she wants a favor for her sons. She wants the best for them. And she says, hey, listen, I need a favor. And Jesus says this in verse 21. "What is it that you want?" He asks, "What do you want?" Now, it's generally worth keeping in mind that when Jesus asks a question, he's not asking for his own information. He's asking for the sake of the person being asked. And so he says, "What is it that you want?" Now, we could spend a whole series worth of conversations on that one question, what is it you want? But for today, let's just take the question at face value. Okay. So here's what she says. Now, so there's all this kind of conversation. She asks for a favor. Jesus says, "What is it that you want?" And then here's what she says. Verse 21, she said, "Grant that one of these two sons of mine may sit at your right hand and the other at your left in your kingdom." So she's like, I want my kids, my kids, to be the starting forwards, the line leaders, the leads in the school play. I want them to be the class president, the student speaker at Earth Day, the class ambassador for the Junior Fire Academy, and the co-captain of the kids who love their mother's auxiliary club. I mean, that's what he wants. That's what she wants. Now, here's what's actually going on, though. She's anticipating some things that people are starting to believe about Jesus, or at least hear about Jesus. At this point in his ministry, Jesus is getting quite a reputation. He's healing people. He's upsetting the religious community by inviting people to be around him that give him a bad reputation. And Jesus also, in his teaching, keeps talking about something called the kingdom of God. And it's the kingdom of God that he's ushering in. And people were interpreting what that meant all the time. Now, back then, what people thought the kingdom of God meant was this, that God would defeat all other earthly kingdoms like Rome and establish a kingdom where God is the boss, a new, more awesome kind of Caesar. But it turns out Jesus' kingdom might not look quite like a newer, better version of all the previous kinds of kingdoms. In all the other kingdoms that people knew, those kings conquered and crushed and demolished political authorities. They squashed resistors. And then upon taking a seat of power, whoever this new king was would presumably put his own people in the most prestigious positions of power and influence in his new regime. And the second in command positions were often represented by this expression, those who would sit in the seats at the right and the left of the king. So this loving mom says, Jesus, can my sons sit at your right and your left in your new kingdom? And this is how Jesus responds, verse 22. You don't know what you're asking. You don't know what you're asking, Jesus said to them. So this mother asked for a favor. What you think this is, these two sitting at my right and at my left, it's not what you think it is. And then Jesus will pivot to include the two sons with the question. But before he does that, we have to get to the root of it all. And this is all the basic idea, especially on Mother's Day weekend. So let's frame up this assumption like this. Mom wants what's best for me. Now on that we can generally agree. I get and I know there are some circumstances where this isn't always the case. I know. No mom is perfect, but let's just suggest that moms and mom figures, when they're at their best, they want what's best for me. Then we can also assume, based on the enormous amount of Bibles to support this, that Jesus also wants what's best for me. And because I'm me, I want what's best for me. Now, it seems like we have a consensus. Three of the most important figures in my life are all aligned on this subject. We all want what is best for me. And the issue isn't whether or not one party wants what's best. The obvious issue is this, is what does best really mean? I mean, if all three of these parties here don't agree on whose best is the best, well, then we have conflict. And if you and I disagree on what our moms say to us, well, they're still our mom. But what we've been saying throughout this series basically is this. When Jesus has in mind a version of whatever is the best, and I don't agree with him, then maybe he's not my Jesus. And this Jesus in this moment right here is about to present an idea that his version of the best kind of life might differ greatly from both mine and my mother's version of what the best is. Now back to the passage, verse 22. He says, can you drink the cup I am going to drink? We can, they answer. Now drinking the cup is essentially a question about their ability to share in the life of Jesus. Jesus is asking, can you share in the kind of life that I intend to give? Do you think you want that kind of life? And they say, yes, we're in. And then Jesus gives them this answer, and it'll take a little bit of explanation. Verse 23. Jesus said to them, you will indeed drink from my cup, but to sit at my right or my left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared by my Father. So, Jesus says, yep, you're gonna share in my kind of life. That's drinking from my cup, which is worth noting that in the previous couple of verses before this exchange with with James and John's mom, Jesus has just told his disciples what kind of life is ahead for him. And this is basically, to sum it up, this is the life he's inviting them to share him. Jesus, a few verses earlier, has explained what his life is gonna look like. He explains it's gonna look like this. He's gonna be arrested, condemned, mocked, flogged, and crucified. That's literally what it's, mocked, flogged, and crucified. And that's what's ahead. They don't appear to have heard any of that stuff at all. Basically, there's gonna be a ton of pain and suffering. It's all very disappointingly unmotherly of Jesus. And he says, sure, you can share in my kind of life. But as far as the positions of honor on his left and right are concerned, Jesus says, well, that's a different thing altogether. When Jesus is, as the Gospel of John says, lifted up, that is to say, in taking his seat of honor, there will be two other seats at his left and his right. Jesus is lifted up on a Roman cross. And on his left and on his right are two other people who are lifted up as well. There are two other people who are lifted up on a Roman cross. And you can see where this is going. You can see the layers of meaning that are interwoven with Jesus' words here. It will not be like you thought. Not at all like you thought. There will be people on my left and people in my life, but not at all like you thought. It's just so rich in irony and depth. And okay, the other disciples hear about this whole conversation. And they're jockeying for positions of prominence in this new kingdom. And apparently they overheard Jesus say there would be some sharing in the cup of this new kind of life in the kingdom. And here's basically what happens. In verse 24, it's verse 24. When the 10 heard about this, they were indignant with the two other brothers. They feel like they're being cheated out of something. James and John may have taken something from the rest of them that they wanted, and they all wanted a piece of the glory of the new kingdom. They all had visions of the best possible life for themselves, and that seemed to include being seen and noticed as important people. They all want what we want, the best possible kind of life for me. And truthfully, they're doing the same kind of mental math that we do all the time. It's a simple proportion. It goes like this. The greater share I have of the best possible life, whatever I imagine that to be, the better my life is. The greater the share of the best possible life, whatever I imagine that to be, the better my life is. Now we can look forward and plan for that. We can look backward and see all that kind of stuff. But from that basic formula, all happiness and consequently all other disappointments flow. Now then, as James and John and their mother are talking with Jesus, the other 10 disciples are worried that a part of that that their part of the best possible life has been taken from them. And in their minds, the best kind of life is the one in which they're the most respected with the most authority. And the second-ranking positions in this new kingdom thing, this thing Jesus is doing, these positions may just have been taken from them, and they're indignant. Have you ever found yourself, perhaps even most obviously in our most present cultural moment, separated from what you might have imagined to be the best possible life? Of course, we all have. The conditions we're living in now aren't the way any of us would have ever imagined as factors in the best kind of life that we could have thought for ourselves. I talked to a friend of mine who owns a business that assists new moms with infants. And she said that the percentage of new moms who are experiencing some version of postpartum depression among her clients is nearly 100%. She said she's never seen that before. Now, obviously, each new mom is experiencing that kind of thing in a unique way and to a varying different degrees, but without being able to be supported by family members in some cases, and in the absence of friends and visitors with a brand new baby, there's no one even to say, please hold my baby while I go to the bathroom. These moms are feeling so alone. I mean, how we live with regard to family and freedom and friendships and Zoom fatigue and takeout food and making home and school and work, it's so different than from the best we ever could have imagined. We all feel like something we've been entitled to have has been taken from us without our permission. Now, back to the passage. Jesus addresses the rest of the disciples, knowing full well that they all want some kind of greatness for themselves. And Jesus says this in Matthew 25. Jesus called them together and said, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. And Jesus is like, you know how the world does stuff. People fight for position. When people get power, they let everyone know. They love to hang it over other people's heads. And by the way, Jesus is pointing out that's exactly what his disciples are wanting for themselves. And he's about to raise a question worth considering. Because he's essentially saying, is that the best kind of life? Do you guys think that's the best kind of life to his own disciples? Jesus is like, you want to be great like the world thinks about greatness because you think that'd be the best kind of life, but maybe you're wrong about that. Maybe I'm not here to give people that kind of life, not because I don't love them with a mother's love, but because I do love them. And that kind of life isn't the best kind of life. Verse 26, not so with you, he says. Whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. Okay, this whole thing about the best kind of life is apparently about serving other people. And Jesus continues, verse 27, he says this. And whoever wants to be first must be your slave. And what that means is this, and it's subtle. In this group of people in Jesus' inner circle, the one who serves the others in that group is the greatest among them. I mean, you have to ask, who's the most difficult person to serve? Of all the people you could think of, the answer is this. Anyone belonging to the group of people with whom you are already fighting to become the greatest. In a sense, what he says is this. The pathway is about making others greater. It's about the pathway to greatness is about making others greater. Are you seeing this? I mean, anybody relating to the idea of why this thing is so incredibly hard for us? The most difficult person to serve is the person with whom you are already fighting to become the greatest over. Okay, verse 28. He says, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. And then he goes on to say, just as the Son of Man, this is Jesus' title for himself, speaking in the third person, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Jesus is like this. Look, in your mind, the kings were the ones who got to be served. Yeah, well, not in this kind of kingdom. Be a servant. Choose to be a slave. That's the best kind of life you get to share it. It's the best kind of life. And do you want it? I have to imagine the disciples kind of backing up a minute. Were they like, I don't know, were they pushing other disciples to the front of the line? Like, I think Jesus wanted to give you a special leader role. Why don't you go talk to him about that? Were they attempting to lock James and John into their requests? Hey, well, Jimmy, Johnny, your mom kind of wants you to be kind of special servant. So look, you guys get to be number one servant. So congratulations on that, you guys. Hey, what do you say, Jimmy and Johnny, why don't you guys whip up some waffles for me and the rest of the fellas? I mean, trust me, it's the best kind of life. It's what you always wanted. I mean, the invitation here is to be like Jesus is. And that way of being apparently is about seeing other people and prominence and importance and fame and resources and leadership in a way that is vastly different than the way that the world sees them. In other words, Jesus is kind of saying like this, the world has its own way of thinking about kings and kingdoms, and that way is a far cry from my way of thinking about those things. And Jesus says, my version of the best possible kind of life is completely incompatible with the world's version. for us. If we're truly honest with ourselves, we inherently disagree with Jesus' premise. We just do. I mean, for the most part, if we could accurately and honestly take an inventory, not only of the lives that we're presently living, but also the lives we dream about living, we'd have to admit, we're chasing stuff that might be more lined up with the world's version of greatness and that kind of best possible kind of life than with Jesus' version. I mean, all of my insecurities, they're almost always connected to my unconscious attachment to the kind of life the world wants to sell me, how I feel about how I look, how wrapped up I am on my kids' successes, people I perceive as threats, how much I care about how people I don't know and will never meet even think of me. These aren't things that are because of the self-giving love of Jesus that I'm regularly practicing. These are symptoms of the way of the world. And this is the outcome of the life Jesus is inviting us to forego. So consider this for a minute. If you could have everything you wanted in your version of the best possible kind of life, would you find everything you're seeking? I mean, if you could have everything you wanted in your version of the best possible kind of life, would you find everything you're really seeking in it? And I'm not just talking about the stuff that you think you want. I'm talking about not on the surface. I'm talking about a little bit deeper. At the why do I think I need this kind of level, are you really going to find everything you're seeking? Now, that's a really valuable question for all of us. Whether or not we have a strong attachment or even an attraction to Jesus, at some point, we do have to ask the question about what it is we're aiming our lives at. Is this, whatever it is, really going to give me what I'm really seeking? And somewhere deep within us, when we see what Jesus is inviting us into, even if we initially reject it, there's a kind of rightness to it. Even if you weren't too sure about Jesus, I mean, maybe something does kind of resonate within you, that kind of life. Like when we stop for a moment and really think about it, it seems way less crazy-making than the world's version of constantly seeking to gain and take and acquire and wield power over others. Eventually, and when we least expect it, we find ourselves coming to grips with the reality that the world and all of its shallowness and all of its promises. And then in those moments, we wonder about Jesus and we ask, what if he's right? And often the only way to decide to take it on, this Jesus way as our own, is when we see it in action. And this week I heard a great story about some people in our church. And by the way, this story is representative of a ton of people. This is just one I happened to personally come across. We have a ministry in our church called MOPS. It's for mothers of young kids, and it literally means mothers of preschoolers. And one of the leaders, along with her husband, spent last Saturday driving to the houses of each member of her table group, and they brought breakfast burritos and donuts. Now, the point of the food wasn't because there was a material need that they were meeting. Some of the moms, by the way, lived in incredible homes, others in more modest homes. It was a relational, spiritual need being addressed because in each house was a similar scene. Managed chaos. On one of the visits, a kid apparently is in the background screaming like he's being barbed with a hot poker, and the kid's mom is telling, with the total calmness that only a mom could have, speaking to while the kids are screaming. She just says, the reason why he's so upset is the reason why he's so upset is because we can't make a gingerbread house today. He doesn't understand that we can't do that, and that's the reason the kid is screaming. Every mom I know who just heard that has a similar story. You just nodded, you're like, I've been there, that was this morning, or that was last night, or whatever. However it is, you've all been there. Now, it's this kind of moment where I'm reminded of a pastor who once said, and I think this is so beautiful. He said this, what if the greatest contribution you make to the kingdom of God may not be something you do, but someone you raise? What if the greatest contribution you make to the kingdom of God isn't something you do, but someone you raise? Now, that my buddy and his wife were checking on these women is an affirmation of that question. These moms were just being seen, finding out that they're not alone. And what my friends did by their action was to affirm the work that God is doing through families. And this is a Jesus kind of story. My friends will tell you, it's just a small gesture, and that's true, except for the people who were feeling so alone. For them, it was huge. Amanda started getting our kids together to help deliver Meals on Wheels with her to some of the senior citizens in our community. And for the first time we went, the kids had no interest in really going, partly because they didn't understand what it entailed. But the kind of persuasion, that only mothers can kind of conjure up, and there may or may not have been, a little bit of, threatening and that kind of convincing. But the kids have come a few times, and now they're asking about the next opportunity to do it. And there are some truly wonderful seniors living, around the community and the church here. And there are also some total, complete characters that are around here too. And my kids now have way better stories to tell. I mean, they're starting to get it, and it's really good. And as a church community, you guys get it too. A couple weeks ago, I shared a brief video of our staff serve day. We were packing some grocery boxes and, for some people with food shortages in our local neighborhoods. And so many people reached out through Instagram, through our website, wanting to be a part of that too. And it was like the very act of serving in this way seemed to look so much like joy and not a burden. And I'm not saying it was easy. And reading a book, or streaming Disney Plus, or lying about how many episodes of The Tiger King you've actually watched, I mean, that's like a lot more relaxing. It's just not better. But the list goes on and on. People are reaching out, and the church, which is the people, not the programs and not the gathering spaces, the church keeps on responding. And apparently it's kind of contagious. Marriages are getting restored. Even though people are kind of getting screen tired, marriages are getting restored through virtual life group meetings, and people are starting to take massive steps in their faith. Some people are taking their very first steps, and generosity is being unleashed, and you get the picture, and I'm just so grateful to you. And you see, Jesus, as we talk about it, he's not anti-greatness. He's just characterizing greatness in a way that the world had never heard of before. The invitation to willingly take on the role of a servant is the antidote to the self-implosion spiral that we often stay in far too long. His way is an invitation to a new, best kind of life. Now, with that in mind, on this Mother's Day, when we can all agree that those who loved us with the maternal kind of love, that they'd all want the best for us, let's ask this question. In light of what we know about Jesus, and whatever his version of the best possible life, to what great thing? And remember, greatness is all about sacrificial love and service. This isn't about being the CEO of the next thing that conquers Amazon or Google, though rest assured, if you do manage to do that, you're paying for dinner. This is about life in Jesus' kingdom, free from the kind of things that the world keeps promising. Now, to what great thing might Jesus be inviting you to participate, to give up, or to step into? I mean, if our share in this kind of life is about using whatever we've been given to make others greater, what great thing might Jesus be inviting you into? Now, as we get a chance to respond, think about how God might be stirring in you to participate in something, to let go of something, or perhaps step courageously into something new. So as we take a minute, consider what this great thing might be for you and who you might serve. And don't forget that maybe your mom might be someone to consider you think about making even greater on this particular weekend.
We exalt
gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace.
His favor be upon you in 1,000 generations, in your family, in your children, and their children, and their children. May his favor be upon you in 1,000 generations, in your family, in your children, and their children, and their children. May his favor be upon you in 1,000 generations, and your family, and your children, and their children, and their children. May his favor be upon you in 1,000 generations, and your family, and your children, and their children, and their children. May his presence go before you and behind you and beside you, all around you, within you. He is with you. He is with you in the morning, in the evening, and you're coming, and you're going, and you're weeping and rejoicing. He is for you. 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 He is for you.
Wherever you are, and however you might do so, would you do this? Would you hold out your hands like this, and as if someone's like giving you a gift? And if you're not comfortable with that, that's cool. This isn't like a sacred rite or anything. It's just a way to place ourselves in a posture to receive what God might want to give to you. So if you're willing, would you hold out your hands and receive this? Jesus says to an audience of his own followers in Matthew 16, whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world and yet forfeit his soul? Jesus, would you help us to see, as difficult as it might be at times, that you offer us a kind of life that the world can never give us. In faith, we receive your love and your invitation to this best possible kind of life, no matter how much it differs from the life that we think we see and know among us. We receive it. And so in your name we pray, amen. Now, to the people we call mom among us, to those who acted as our mothers when our mothers weren't able to carry the load, thank you. We are grateful to you all. Happy Mother's Day. God bless you. We'll see you very, very soon.
Well, thanks again for joining us today. If you have any needs for prayer, we have a team of people who would love to pray with you online. Through our website and our social media, we have ways for you to serve and get connected, even online during this season. And if you haven't already, download our app, which is another great way to stay informed on all that's going on. We hope you have a great week and look forward to being together again next weekend. Take care.